felt like you are fighting with God, but you don't want him to let go as well. Hey there, I'm Danielle Zapchenk, and thanks for joining me today on the Parable Podcast. Meet personal scholar and professor Angie Jacobs as she talks about how to hold on when you need to let go.
Are you ready to stop punishing yourself? And when you are, we can start to help you heal. And it floored me that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm punishing myself. I have been punishing myself. Like, I don't deserve happiness. I don't deserve love. I don't deserve to be forgiven for the things that I said to my husband before he passed.
Just as a trigger warning, Angie talks about suicide and its effects. So in case this is a sensitive topic for you right now, or you have little ears with you, I will make a note within the show notes. Here's my conversation with Angie Jacobs. Thrilled to introduce you to a new friend of mine, Angie. And Angie and I met at an event a couple of months ago, and we really only talked, I felt like 5 minutes. But afterwards, I'm like, would you mind coming on the podcast? Because there's just so much that you can't say really in an event. And maybe you shared it with the table before I got there. But gosh, there's just so much about each person that you're just like, I want to know more. So Angie, thank you so much for your willingness to just randomly come on this podcast.
Yes. And thank you so much for asking me. I'm so excited.
What would you say is something about summer that you really enjoy?
Just the sunshine. I am a big outdoor person. Anytime I can be outdoors, that I'm going to be outdoors and just enjoying the weather. Trees are my thing. So I love to be around the trees, and I love when they're in bloom. And so, yeah, I'm excited about summer, but I'm also excited a little bit about fall because I love the changing of the season. Yes. And I'm just reminded that every season of life, there's something new to hold on to and to be excited.
Do you have a favorite tree specifically?
I don't have a favorite tree. I just really like all of them. I do have some Japanese maples in my yard, and I love the look of the Japanese maple, but I am by far an expert on trees.
Angie, what do you do day to day? What are you passionate about?
Day to day, I guess in my working life, I am an interpersonal scholar, and I work in teaching, undergraduates and graduate students in how to build relationships. And so it's just so fitting in my life, because one of the things that I'm really passionate about is helping other people, and women in particular, in navigating those hard places in life. And I have spent a lot of time partnering with women. And so this podcast is just so perfect because we share our stories and we talk about what's hard in our lives and how we're navigating that. And I'm working on this myself, but I'm also trying to help other women to soften to those hard times and those hard places in life, rather than hardening our own hearts. And, I said I loved trees. And so just this one experience comes to mind where I was sitting outside and I was talking with my husband, and I was just watching the trees sway back and forth. I was like, hey, look at those beautiful trees. And they're swaying in the wind, and they're bending, and they're softening to this hard thing that you're navigating. And I'm like, I just love that concept that we can soften to this and go with whatever's happening, and instead of hardening our heart and then snapping in that hard wind or whatever we're going through.
Okay, so do you teach college age students?
Yes.
Okay.
At university.
Yeah. So do you find that it is that's a real challenge for them to have an interpersonal relationship? How long have you been doing that? And then have you seen any shifts because of just social media, culture, different dynamics?
Yes. I've been doing it for a very long time, 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And I have loved every step of it. And so I feel very, very fortunate to have this profession. But yes, my students and I, we always build these really strong relationships because they need, as humans, we all need to be heard, and we all need to be seen and accepted. And so when we talk about relationship building, what do we need? What do we need for ourselves? What do we need to be in relationship to others? And students just open up, and this is a space for them. And they always say to me, boy, this feels a lot like therapy. And so I love that to some extent. But then I'm like, okay, well, it's not therapy, but we certainly can learn something about ourselves, of who we are in relationship to other people. And sometimes we have really hard relationships, and we learn how, even in my class, how to soften to those and really listen to other people.
Is that a skill set that you recognized early on for yourself? Did you education, but also this conversation around relationships? I've gone through many different trainings and understanding your gifts. And most of the time, it's like these grace gifts that God gives us that we I just don't recognize because they're just literally a part of who I am. And we're like, doesn't everybody have these kind of gifts? And we just don't even realize it. Or is that something that you have learned over time because of the dynamics that you grew up in?
I think I acquired it over time. I was a loner as a young kid. I mean, I remember hiding out in a bathroom when it was recess time or lunchtime because I had no friends. I think I came to this, I laugh because when I first came to college, I started out in psychology because I didn't know what else to do. And I thought, well, I took a psychology class in high school and it sounded so interesting. But when I came to college and we were studying something, I don't remember quite what it was. And the teacher was talking about, well, internally, how does this person feel? And what kind of things are they experiencing? And my first thought was, well, it has nothing to do with what they're feeling inside. This person was just mean to them. Or, it was in the relationship, in the interaction itself that this person felt this thing. And so it's interactional. And I'll never forget, my teacher wrote on my paper, maybe you should study communication rather than psychology because I was interested in how we were communicating and how we were interacting. And I took that seriously. And so I switched my majors and I've never looked back.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing.
It started there perhaps.
Well, Angie, we all have stories, and I think that is why I enjoy communicating with people, is because it helps me better understand another person, understand maybe a little bit of how that connects to my personal story. And I just think it's really interesting just to hear from other people. So that is the heart of the Parable Podcast. And then ultimately how God has taught us some lessons. So Angie, I'd love for you to share with us one of your parable stories today.
Mine is learning how to hold on when you need to let go. And I know that sounds very oppositional, learning to hold on when you need to let go. And what I mean is learning to hold on to your faith when you need to let go of the hard. And that's been part of my journey for the last 18 years, is learning how to hang on to my faith when I have just encountered so many hard things and I just want to walk away from it.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about what brought you to that space. Because we can go through our life, we don't even recognize that we're learning anything, but you're talking about holding on to your faith and just also being able to let go. So what did that look like within your own life?
I was baptized when I was 10 years old. I didn't have a background of growing up in the church, but I somehow was connected to church through a friend and really connected with, I felt God and Jesus and was baptized. And so faith to me, honestly, was easy up until I was in my mid-30s. And it was easy. And I went to church and I was engaged in things. And then I went through a really hard challenge in my 30s. And that challenge was I lost my spouse to suicide. And a little bit of the backstory, I guess, that makes that, I guess, where my holding on to faith when I want to let it go comes in is that my spouse and I had been having some marital troubles and we had been praying and when we were, faithful churchgoers and volunteering in the church, and we were praying God, help us through this and help us see past these things and these challenges. And I was pregnant with my third. We have 4 children together. I was pregnant with my third child, and we were just really going through these hard times, and we prayed and we worked very hard, and we were able to overcome that challenge. And we had our third daughter, and then 2 years later, we had our 4th child, and I thought we were in the happiest season of our life. And then this challenge reared its ugly head again, and I was angry. I was so angry, and I realize now that my anger was misdirected, but I was angry at God. How could you allow this to happen? I've done everything right. I have given everything to you. I have given everything to my family, and my anger was just directed at God. How could you let this thing happen? How could you let this thing happen? And I literally walked away from my faith at that moment, but not there. That wasn't the catalyst. But my husband and I had been arguing about this issue. And it was a Saturday morning in October, and we were arguing. And I finally said, I have had enough. I have had enough. I cannot do this anymore. I've invited my parents to come up and I'm leaving. And so I went into the bathroom and I slammed the door, and God spoke to me in that moment. And he said, Angie, you need to get on your knees and you need to pray to me. And I was so angry, and I literally shook my fist at him. I said, I'm not going to pray to you. You don't show up for me. You do not listen. I will not pray to you. And I heard God say in his gentle voice, Angie, I need you to be on your knees and you need to pray right now. And I continued to argue with God. I said, I'm not going to do this. My faith is done with you. I don't believe that you are for me. And again, I realized my faith, my anger was misplaced. I don't want to say that it wasn't, but I was just so angry in that moment. I couldn't see, I couldn't soften. And in that moment of God's asking me, get on your knees and pray, and I didn't. It was in that moment that my children and I were in the home, and my spouse took his life. I heard the gun go off. And then I just was broken. I was broken. And I said, I'm done with you, God. I'm done with you. And it took me 3 years to come back to that. But I fought against faith. We lost friends, of course, too, because suicide is a hard death and it's a misunderstood one. And people walked away from us. So it was just a very hard journey. And I remember many times just lying on my bathroom floor crying, like, God, why aren't you here? Why can't I hear you? And there were so many times that I felt like I was crying out to God and he just would not show up for me. He just would not show up for me. And it was only when I would get quiet that I could hear God start to speak again. And there's one moment in time where I'm lying on the bathroom floor and I finally dry up my tears and I hear this soft voice and he says, Angie, I'm still here. I'm still here. Let me show you my love for you. And it's in that moment I started to climb back in. And in that moment, I feel like I've always been one to maybe argue with God. And that's the wrong thing to say. With God, but I just remember I said, okay, God, I can't pray to you right now because I just don't know where my heart is. I don't know how to pray to you. I don't know how to show back up and have the kind of faith that I had before. But I remember saying, just don't let me go. Like, don't let me go. Hold on to me. Even if I can't hold on to you, God, just don't let go of me. And I feel like in all of that, God has been so faithful to not let go of me. And we have so many beautiful stories, my children and I, of all the ways that God has shown up powerfully in our lives since then. And that's where this whole, learning how to hold on is like, if you can say nothing else, ask God to hold on to you when you can do nothing. Like you can't do anything, but just don't let me go. And he's faithful in that.
Yeah. See, I knew there was something more to this story. Goodness gracious, Angie. First of all, I'm so sorry for the loss of your husband. What was his name?
Brian.
Now, did you... One, I think our idea of mental health has changed drastically over the years. Were you aware that Brian was struggling in this way? Did he have any ideation? Nothing came to you?
No.
Wow.
Hindsight, of course, is 2020. I can see it now. I've made in the past 18 years, he passed in 2006. That's been part of my research. And, I do suicide awareness and prevention and intervention talks regularly now, help other people see what I couldn't see then.
Yeah.
But I wasn't aware.
This is a vulnerable question, so you can choose to decide if you don't want to answer this. Did you take any guilt or shame upon yourself? Because I slammed the door and I walked into that bathroom and I said I was leaving. And so there is some ownership that you felt, even though that was what Brian chose to do. What was that like for you?
Shame, blame, guilt, you name it, all of it. I spent many years, it took me 3 years to actually even go to a counselor because I was so filled with shame and guilt that I said this horrible thing to him. I threatened to leave the marriage. I didn't see that he was struggling. I took all of that on. And I felt like, what kind of a wife am I to not know that he was struggling? We knew that he was struggling in some ways. He was a police officer. So there's also this added element of he's dealing with all kinds of trauma from his own job. And so, yes, I took that on. And it took a lot of healing on my behalf, too. So the anger, when I say I was angry with God, I was also angry with myself. And I just hardened myself to all of that. And I remember when I did finally go to a therapist, she finally asked me, are you ready to stop punishing yourself? And that was a powerful moment for me.
So interesting that God allows us this grace and mercy, but yet we still punish ourselves over and over for the one thing that we said or the trajectory of how our life has gone. Yeah, that's so challenging because that human nature within us, it's like, well, if I just didn't do that.
Right.
There's a lady that I know that her husband, he struggles with depression. And there's been times where, it's almost been the end. And she had just told me, she's just I just eventually had to give it up to God, be I'm not going to be able to stop this if that's the way that it's. And I'm gosh, to get to that place, to be able to say that, that is really, really hard. Talk to me a little bit about, not only were you angry, struggling through this, not seeing a counselor for 3 years, but you had young children.
Very young children. Mm-hmm.
What was that like, parenting now as a single mom, but also just like such trauma to walk them through? What was that like for you?
Very difficult. So the kids were ages, my youngest were 2 and 4 years old when Brian passed, and my oldest were 9 and 12. So all very young.
Yeah.
My youngest 2 weren't in school yet. We were getting ready to send them into preschool, but it was difficult. And one of the things that I realized is I know that I have a strength within me, but I didn't feel very strong on the inside. I felt like I was dying on the inside, but on the outside, I presented this really strong front. And you know, as a scholar, I even wrote about some of these things, but women and, well, people in general, not just women, but people would say to me, you're the strongest person I know.
Yeah.
And of course, it's all well-intentioned, but what it did was make me feel like I can't tell someone that I'm struggling.
That's so good.
And because people needed me to be strong, I had to be strong. So I've been parenting, or I parented for 17 years by myself, was recently just married again, but waited until all the children were grown before, obviously, I didn't want to, I thought the kids were traumatized enough that I wanted to, you know, hold us close and not change other things for them. But one of the things that I realized is that I was strong for them. I didn't really reach out for help that I should have, and that made things a lot harder, I think. But at our recent event where you and I had met, one of the things that I realized, and I told our friend Whitney, is like, I said, you know, darn it, I thought I did everything right. And today is a reminder that I didn't do everything that I should have done. But my oldest daughter came with us to this Illuminate event, and it was a beautiful experience. But we talked about one of these things, like, what's something that God's shining a light on? And I said that apparently I still have some wounding that I need to move through. And my daughter started to cry immediately. And she said, Mom, you've never told me how much this hurt you.
Yeah.
And my daughter said, I feel like I always have to be in control and be strong like my mom. And I'm like, darn, I was doing the wrong thing. You know, I thought I was doing a great thing by not introducing anxiety and fear because the kids lost so much. But my lack of vulnerability, my lack of ability to show them that sometimes that was hard, then translated to them also needing to be hard and or to be strong, right?
Yes.
In the telling, instead of being soft to that. So my daughters and I are now working through that thanks to this Illuminate event. Like how can we soften to this? Yeah.
That's really great, Angie. Yeah. That time to reflect back. But I think what you just said is like, I can't tell anyone that I'm struggling because when people say like, oh, I'm so proud of you. Like, you're so strong. You're the strongest person I know. Yeah. And obviously it is well-intentioned, but if we create systems and relationships and friendships around that idea of like, well, she's the strong one, it never allows us to be authentically who we are ultimately. What would be your encouragement to somebody if they kind of feel like that they're in that place where they got to hold it all together? What would you say to them?
I would say find someone who's a safe space for you and let them know that you're struggling, because we can't do this alone. And I look back on my experiences and where originally I said I didn't see God at all in my life. I look back now and I'm like, I see everywhere where he was walking alongside me, and he did send people to help me. And I would say open yourself up to that help, even though it's so hard to do. And it's okay to disappoint people, to not be strong. I've had friends say, not only are you the strongest person I know, but you make this look so easy. And this, it being single parenting 4 children, right, while I'm also going through grief.
Thank you. Just a heads up, don't say those things.
Don't say those things, yeah. But again, well-intentioned, but yeah, it's okay to, we've heard this many a times now, this is a popular saying, it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to let people know I'm not okay. Yeah. That's what I would say, even to my previous self.
That reminds me of my friend Greg. We've done a couple episodes with him. He's lost his son to suicide. And yeah, he recognized early on, like, I don't know if this is within the same grief program. They like to put that on like a t-shirt, but he is like a huge proponent of that, of just saying, you don't need to stay there. And it's okay you got to move through that. You mentioned that after Brian had passed, that you lost friends because in the church there is a stigma of suicide. And I would say that I was one of those people for quite some time of just like, oh, this is a sin, and not understanding mental health, not understanding, gosh, like also just like the grief that comes after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple times in my life that I just had to really reevaluate and rethink, okay, is this the right framework to be thinking of? If you could help people just like better understand like that grief process and also just what people need in that season rather than turning away, what could you speak into that, Angie? It's a hard topic.
Well, it's a hard topic. If I might take it a different direction
Sure.
and say, I mean, what I needed obviously was people to show up and not walk away. But what I would say is this, and I just came to this discovery a couple of days ago, Danielle, when I was talking with my new husband and he's so supportive of all of this, and he allows me to have that grief and that space to still talk about Brian. But we were talking about the things, how God has shown up. And he said, Angie, not only has God been so good in your life, but he had such compassion for Brian. And I would say that to anybody who's in the church who thinks this is a sin. Make no mistake that God loved Brian so much that he spoke loudly to me and said, get on your knees and pray. And he wasn't praying for me. He wanted me to pray for Brian. And I didn't know what I was praying for, but that's how God showed up. Get on your knees and pray for him. There's another story, if I might share it really quickly. One of the ways that God showed up, and there were so many beautiful moments. I'd love to sit here for hours with you and tell you all of them. But there was one moment where, the reality was this: after Brian passed away, my income reduced to half. And that's just the reality. And so as an educator, for many of us, we're paid one time a month, and so my income was split in half to 50%. And I was paid once a month. And we were, at this moment, financially, we were struggling a little bit. And also a harsh reality is that when a suicide occurs, insurance doesn't usually pay life insurance policies. So funeral expenses and things of that nature become difficult. But Brian passed in October, and the kids were very interested in, Mom, we have to get this beautiful headstone for Dad. We have to get this beautiful headstone for Dad. And luckily for me, they said, well, you know what? It's late October. We don't actually place headstones now because it's coming into the winter time. We won't place that until early spring. or late spring, like late April, early May. So you have some time to think about it. So that gave me like 6 months. And I'm like, okay, I got to figure out a way to pay for this headstone, 6 months from now. And so I wait, and here it is, beginning of April. And the kids and I are like, okay, let's go look for this headstone. And so they pick out this beautiful headstone. And of course, all I can see is dollar bills. It's just going up and it's going up and it's going up. And, in these moments, I'm like, okay, God, I haven't been a great, a faithful servant of yours, but I need you to show up for me, and I need to know how to do this, right? I need to, and so here I am, like, I don't want to talk to you, God, I can't pray to you, but here I am saying, I still need this from you, like the Israelites, give me, right? And then forgetting that he's there. So here I am that person, and so I'm like, God, I don't know how to do this. You can't make this up. So we go home that day, and I have the bill in my hand that says, here's how much it's going to be. And the kids and I walk in the house. I am getting the mail out of the mailbox, and inside the mailbox is a check and a letter from St. Giles Church, which is the church that Brian grew up in Chicago, Illinois, St. Giles Catholic Church. He's been there since a little boy. And there was this letter, and it said, Dear Angie, the Lord has laid upon us that we need to take up a collection for you and for Brian, and we would like to just give you this money. And it was $5 more than what this headstone cost.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was telling that story, and I was saying how good and faithful is God to me and the kids. And my husband said, and how compassionate is he for Brian? Yeah. Because Angie, that check could have come from anywhere. And it was 6 months after he had passed. Yeah. But he said it came from his boyhood church. God cares for Brian. And not only that, he wanted Brian to have this beautiful thing. So don't you think for a second it was just about you, Angie. And it wasn't bad that he said that. Yeah. He was like, but God showed up and he had compassion for Brian. So even though it was suicide, God still loved him. And so I would say to all of us, if God can continue to love, so can we. And thank you for letting me share that story.
Of course. No, that's a lovely story. I love those moments. Sometimes it's easy for us to forget. So like when we reflect back, you're like, oh yes, you were in this. You were always in it. You were always in it. Now, Angie, you said that, you walked away from your faith for about 3 years. I think that's healthy. Not to say that like, okay, everybody walk away from your faith. But I think it's important for us to take the time to recognize, okay, like how is my faith my own?
Yes.
And also you talked about arguing with God. Yeah. I think that's healthy too, because it allows us to, one, continue to build our conversation. If we think about the people that we love in our life, we're not always like joyful and positive. Like we're going to have to communicate in some way. And that helps break down those barriers. What were the main things that you needed to let go through like these hard seasons? Because through that talk of anger,
I think I had to let go of first my own shame and guilt related to what happened, because I think, I was punishing myself for that. And I did feel that, I didn't deserve to be loved. I didn't deserve to be accepted by a loving God. I didn't deserve to even have loving relationships, so I didn't seek those out. So I had to let go of that thinking. But I also had to let go of this idea that my faith had to be perfect.
Yeah.
That I had to be perfect, and that God could only love me if I was smiling and happy and serving in the church. And I had to let go of that model. And I had to also realize sometimes that my faith really, and what it looks like, isn't always entirely up to me. Right? That God was still going to be there, and he was not swayed at all or upset by my anger at him. He was not upset that I was going to walk away. And it was only when I could get still that he could actually speak to my heart. And so I try to do that now, is just to get still and say, okay, God, what is the path? What is next for me? And what does that look like? And, I try to use that like now, and it's a cycle of remembering and forgetting what God is capable of and how God shows up. Like you said, we remember, we forget. And there are times where, I'm in a season of my life right now, I can't lie, that I'm just very apathetic. There's been some church hurt in the process. And, sometimes and right now I'm church homeless. I don't feel like I belong anywhere, but I now have the ability to say, okay, God, don't let me go.
Yeah.
Continue to work this out with me. And I don't have to look perfect. I don't have to sound perfect. But what I need is for you not to let me go. So I've got to let go of these dark spaces in my life, but I need to also hang on to the belief that God's got me.
Yeah, that's so powerful, Angie. You had mentioned that it took you some time to go into counseling. I think sometimes people believe, obviously, for major trauma, I think that's always necessary. But even like for small things or things that we're struggling with, counseling or therapy is really still a challenge for some, because we're like, oh, well, isn't God going to help us through that? Like if we just pray about it, it'll be released. But kind of like what you do with your interpersonal relationships. Yes, it sounds like counseling, what you do, but it's really being able to communicate and to express, get out those feelings or those things that we didn't even recognize were there, and having somebody speak into that. Talk to me a little bit about that. Maybe that start of that journey of counseling for you, why that was so impactful, but how it really helped you grow and learn more about yourself.
Well, I think, first of all, it took me that long to get there because I couldn't even speak out loud what had happened without just falling to pieces. So that took that time for me just to be able to say out loud, my spouse died by suicide. I was a complete mess at that time. I would not have been able to say that. And there's a lot of, stigma attached to that as well. But getting into counseling and being able to say those things was so life-saving to me, simply because my counselor was able to see through all of the mess and say, you're punishing yourself. And actually, that wasn't even the first time. I had probably been seeing her for about 2 months at that point. And she finally just said, and listened, and was just a beautiful moment of just listening to everything I had to say. And finally, she said, I think we're ready. And I have this question for you. Are you ready to stop punishing yourself? And when you are, we can start to help you heal. And it floored me that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm punishing myself. I have been punishing myself. Like, I don't deserve happiness. I don't deserve love. I don't deserve to be forgiven for the things that I said to my husband before he passed, or I don't deserve to be forgiven because I didn't recognize that he was struggling and was in such a dark space. And I was just such a dark person to him, and I wasn't light to him. But in that moment, yes, sometimes God can, and God, we know this, God can heal in an instant, but in my case, he did not, but he used other people to help me do that healing. And I would be lying if I said that it was my first counselor that I had been to. I actually had to go through 3 before I finally found the one that really resonated with me. And not that the others were bad, but we just didn't connect. And so it finally took this one who could see through the weeds for me and say, here. And that resonated with me.
Angie, you did get remarried. Was that something that was one you even were like, that was even on your plan, your radar, because after such trauma, you're just like, listen, we're just going to stay by myself. And I'm just going to look at my trees and we're going to be fine. What was that season like? Where now, like, do I go dating? Do I have to try to find somebody on the internet? Like, what?
Yes.
That's fun.
Oh my goodness. I would never wish dating in adulthood to anybody. And I had well-intentioned friends. I had so many women say, oh, I've got the perfect person for you. And I refused. I'm like, there's no blind dating for me. There's no internet dating for me. I didn't want any of that. And I truly believed, and I loved being married. I feel like the best things that I've ever done in my life are, I thought at the time, be a wife and be a mother. And I feel just so fortunate to be able to be a mother. And I craved marriage and that partnership with someone, but I feared it too. And as I said earlier, I didn't want to be married, so it wasn't really on my mind as I was raising the kids, because I wanted to circle around them and protect them. And we were so fortunate to have, I had a good job and we had a wonderful family support system around us. And I didn't want to disrupt that. And so it wasn't until the kids got a lot older, I started to think, I'm going to be an empty nester here soon. and like they're going to college and they're doing all of these things and I don't want to spend my life alone. And so, if it happens organically, I was open to it. And, I knew that I had to open my heart to that and risk being hurt again. But I wanted to open my heart to that, but it wasn't going to be through internet dating and it wasn't going to be through blind dates. And I said, if he shows up in my life and he's just a natural part of that, then I'm going to welcome that. And funny enough, I love yoga. And one day, this really incredibly attractive man shows up to yoga. And I said, okay. And my girlfriend says, he's single.
Oh, okay.
And so we had been in a yoga class together for several months. And we were I was going down to a yoga place about 30 miles from where I live because I love hot yoga, love everything about hot yoga. And he also was from the same town or one town over like 10 minutes away going there. And finally, the yoga instructor said, you two are kind of from the same place. Do you know one another? So she was the catalyst to introduce us. And we have not been separate since. We're like, no, it's so nice to meet you. And we talked about, we love to run. So he's like, well, would you like to go run with me the next day? So from that introduction on, we have never been separated. And we've been together 3 years now. In a week and a half, we celebrate our 2 years. So we got married pretty quickly. Yeah. We did a little over a year and then married. And so this is our 3 years together.
I love that, Angie. Yeah. How cute. Yeah. I think it's so sweet. I think that's so great.
And he still loves to do yoga with me.
That's fantastic. Yes. That is awesome. All right. Well, Angie, thank you so much for truly being vulnerable with me, being willing to share this. Mm-hmm. And also, it's just beautiful to see, even through the pain, like God's redemptive work within your life and just what he's done specifically just within yourself. That's amazing. If people wanted to get connected to you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I would say probably LinkedIn, the best way to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we will have Angie's LinkedIn link, however they say that, in today's show notes. Angie Jacobs, thank you so much, truly, for being on the Parable Podcast.
Thank you, Danielle.
Wow, what a story. I hope that you were able to empathize with Angie and hear her challenges of building her own faith. Plus, be able to hear from somebody who has walked through this tragedy of suicide and has come out on the other side. To connect with Angie, simply visit DanielleZapchenk.com for details. And here are 2 reflection questions from our time with Angie. Number 1, is there any hidden resentment or anger you're holding against God that you've held on to? Number 2, are you wearing this mask of strength like Angie used to? What is maybe an actionable item you can take to not put that back on? Before you go, could you do me a favor and click on the show notes to take my listener survey? And by doing so, I'm going to give you 10 tips to enhance your conversations and be able to listen really well. This episode was edited by my amazing husband, Eric Zapchenk, and we hope you were encouraged to think about your own story and remember your parable showcases how God is never going to let go. We'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.